Welcome, everybody, to the Monday Night Tours. I am your guide on this journey, Josh Kaiser, and I am joined today by Josh Haddix.
What is good in the hood?
And a one Mr. Kyle Hoagland.
Salutations, gentle sirs and gentle ladies. What's going on, everybody?
Feels good to be back recording. For those of you who know us from the Pseudo Nerd podcast, we welcome you. Of course, we've kind of jumped ship, much like Hall and Nash and many others did during the Monday Night Wars. But
I see what you did there.
You see that? Yeah. But we've decided we recorded a podcast for about a year and a half, and kind of on all sorts of nerd topics, movies, comics, video games, you name it. And if that's your thing, go check out the Pseudo Nerd podcast. There's plenty of episodes for you to enjoy. But we decided to kind of change things up, go in a new direction. And now that's what we're going to do. We're doing a podcast where we kind of explore a week-by-week episodic look into Monday Night Raw and WCW Monday Nitro. We'll kind of break down each episode, discuss everything, what we liked, what we didn't, what's funny, what's not. It's kind of a retrospective look into the period that is known as the Monday Night Wars, the golden age of wrestling, if you will.
I mean, you ask a lot of different people. People will give you different versions of the golden age, or what is considered the golden age. It's kind of like what people now consider classic rock based on people's age. But no, yeah, for us, this was definitely the golden age.
Absolutely. I mean, ratings,
or for Haddix, he never knew it existed.
This was an unknown age.
Well, if you will. For what it's worth, we should probably quickly just let everybody know kind of where our background is from the world of wrestling, if you will. I'll start with myself. I kind of came in and out of wrestling throughout my lifetime. I grew up watching, Hulkamania in the early 90s, when kind of that probably 91 to 93-ish era of wrestling. Only WWF is all I watched back then. And it wasn't till probably April of 98 after Austin won the title and Goldberg was kind of in the middle of his earlier part of his streak, is kind of when I got back into wrestling. That's when I got into WCW Nitro and all of that. And so for me, we're going to start, we're starting this podcast off with the very first Nitro because that's kind of when the wars began. So there's going to be a couple of years here of wrestling that I am unfamiliar with, maybe a little familiar with some of the bigger storylines, pay-per-views that I may have gone back and watched, but that's kind of where I stand. And Hoagie sort of alluded to it with Haddix, but Haddix, why don't you tell us your background with wrestling?
Mine is very simple. I started watching wrestling. I don't know the exact year, but The Rock was in the Nation of Domination. I do remember that. So that was well into. Well, I shouldn't say well into. It was in the midst of the wars, but I think there's still a few years for that. Am I not? Am I correct in saying that?
So he joined the Nation in 97. He kicked Farouk out and led the Nation in 98.
Yeah, it was probably more in the 98 era.
That's what I was thinking.
And it was towards the end. It was towards the end of him being in the Nation. I have like faint memories of that. So
yeah, you were probably there for that
DX
Nation thing. DX sort of feud.
Yeah, yes, that whole thing. Yep. Right. So, and that was literally it. I watched from then on. So basically, like the whole Attitude Era, and only WWF. So I maybe caught a WCW on commercial breaks, and that was it. But I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't tell you if some of the wrestlers came over from WCW because I never, nothing like that. I had no knowledge of WCW at all, nor do I have any knowledge of WWF prior to, the Attitude Era, if you will.
It's kind of funny, is I think that's going to be a great dynamic to have you involved and kind of see your impression, especially the WCW. There's a certain roster of wrestlers that were primarily WCW, especially the cruiserweights and things like that never made their way over to the WWF. And I'm I think, at least for myself, I'm sure Hoagie, I'm speaking for you as well in this. It'll be very entertaining to see your thoughts on some of these talent that WCW had throughout the years, and some of the booking, anyways, too. So excited to have that new dynamic for the WCW end. That said, Kyle, how about you?
So I kind of got in and out as well, but I did watch a lot of WWF, probably from the early 90s, like probably 91, 92 to about 94. It was actually around the time when Hogan left the WWF. I think his last match in the WWF at the time was SummerSlam, or I know he was facing Yokozuna. It was the cameraman, blinded him, and it wound up being like somebody who was working for Yokozuna, and then Yokozuna beat him for the title, and then Hulk went to WCW after that. That's when I kind of stopped, because I was a big Hogan fan, and there was really no way for me to watch Hogan because they really didn't have like a television show. So the only time I really watched wrestling was, I think it was either Saturday night or Saturday morning.
They had morning shows. Yeah, they also had a Saturday night main event every once in a while, but it was mostly those like Saturday morning or Sunday morning shows.
Yep. So I did grow up with watching like Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect and Razor Ramon and those types of guys. And then I said I kind of fell out of it, maybe watching something from here to there, but I got back into it probably around early to mid 97. That would have been when I got back to it, and then I went in full force when all of my friends started getting back into wrestling, and when the Attitude Era really kind of springboarded, if you will, in 1998 after WrestleMania, like when you came in.
Yeah, I was definitely kind of on the following the bandwagon at that point, but I'm sure I was not alone by any means. A lot of people started getting into wrestling again there, and for us, all just in our early 30s, this is the era of wrestling that kind of defines our generation, or degeneration, as the case may be, right?
No comment.
That said, kind of just quickly let you guys know how the show's going to, normally be formatted. We're going to go week by week, and today being September 4th, 2017, we are at the 22nd anniversary of the debut episode of Nitro. So we thought it was, kind of serendipitous that the 2 days, it is a Monday, and that's when it started. So we thought we would start, right there, that first day Nitro, kind of kick things off. And what we'll do is we'll go week by week, and we'll kind of break down each show, segment by segment, give our thoughts on matches, any funny promos or storylines or anything like that, and anything we want to kind of discuss around that. That said, we're not going to kind of give you the dirt sheets behind it. We're not going to let you, we're not going to go back and read, Dave Meltzer's Observer notes or anything like that. That's not us. We're treating this as fans, For some of us like Haddix, it's the first time watching it, and even for Kyle and I, to some degree, at least the early stuff will be watching it, and then also trying to sit back and watch it 22 years later. Do we have nostalgia glasses back then? Is it really that good compared to today's product, and all that kind of stuff? So we're going to treat it more like fans. We're going to have a lot of laughs, I think. Kind of enjoy the whole thing, but we're not by any means going to go the behind the scenes end of stuff. There's plenty of stuff out there. you want to listen to Bruce Pritchard's podcast or Coronet's or, Jim Ross, whoever the case may be. There's plenty of people out there if you want to know the behind-the-scenes stuff. We're not the experts, and we're not going to pretend to be. We're just we're gonna treat it like fans, and I think it's going to be a fun way of reviewing these old episodes, and we'll just go week by week. And if this podcast lasts 6 years, then I think we've done a hell of a job recording for 6 years.
And one thing that's nice about this, too, is that this can be kind of an interactive thing for the listeners. So for those that are wrestling fans, and I feel like most people who would consider themselves, fans of wrestling, I would probably say, 7 out of 10 of you have some sort of access to the WWE Network. Because usually if people are going to be into it, it's a no-brainer to get it. It's like the same price as Netflix. They have a lot of nice original shows, and no, WWE Network is not paying us to say any of this. But the nice thing about it is that...
nice if they were, though.
Yeah, for sure. You can watch these shows, too. So that we're talking about this particular week in wrestling, or that first episode of Nitro for this one. So you can always pause this podcast, go back, watch these shows as they're going, and then come back and listen to our retrospective on it.
And really, I think that's the way you're gonna want to do it too. If you're not watching that episode, you're not going to you're not going to understand a lot of what we're talking about, and it'll be a lot more entertaining for you as a listener to have go on there, watch the episode ahead of time, and then follow along with our our review in retrospective of it.
Yep, and it also just creates the conversations. I mean, that when you guys are going to follow us on Twitter or on Facebook or on our website or whatever, that's where the talking points are going to come from you guys as well. We love talking about this kind of stuff with people. This is one of the topics that we can get lost in talking about for hours and hours, even after we're done doing the podcast. So by all means, watch the show, download the podcast. Listen to us ramble about it, and then come back with your thoughts and ideas and opinions, because we'd love to hear them.
Absolutely, and I'm sure this show's going to evolve as we go along. That said, let's just get right into it. Like I mentioned, we're starting right here because this is going to be the first episode of Nitro. Whether you want to say the war started when Hogan signed with WCW, or it wasn't until Nash and Hall jumped ship in May of '96 or whatever. The fact of the matter is we're doing the Monday Night Wars, and the Monday Night Wars started the day WCW aired on a Monday night to combat Monday Night Raw, which had been going on since for a couple of years now, since '93, I believe. So we'll say it officially began September 4th, '95, and Bischoff, of course, kind of running the show at this point, got Turner to sign off, and he gave him primetime slot on Monday night to help battle the WWF at the time. And it was a great time for them to debut because Raw was preempted for the U.S. Open. And actually, I went back and watched a couple of the old Raws that happened just before this Nitro aired. And they were off air for about 3 weeks or so. They didn't have any episodes of Raw because of the U.S. Open. And they even, it's kind of funny now if you think about it, but they advertised it as the next season of Raw will start September 11th, 1995. So Nitro having a great week where they don't have to worry about the competition. And then if you're a wrestling fan, you're flipping through, oh, shoot, there's wrestling on TV Monday night. Now, this isn't the Raw I'm used to, but let's see what they've got. So great plan for them to start their debut on that date. And one of the big differences for Nitro is it was live. They were going live from day one, something Raw didn't do really until like 97 or so. They might have had a live episode here and there, but for the most part they were recorded, which of course, as we get further into the tour, if you will, there's going to be other things we can discuss with the pre-recorded episodes of Raw. But Nitro starts, they're live, and they're in the Mall of America. And Hoagie, I want to get your immediate thought, just seeing as they showed the venue, here you are in the Mall of America. What did you think?
So the first thing I thought was that it just immediately, it was not in like an auditorium, was not in an arena. It looked it just looked very different. It was something like if you were used to watching, Raw, you immediately kind of saw just like a different feel to it. There weren't a lot of signs, obviously, back then. Maybe the whole idea of everyone bringing signs wasn't that big a deal. Also, I think there might have just been a little bit more of a, just for the sake of focusing more on the in-ring competition, maybe signs were maybe relegated to ones that they saw were okay. Like I know there was one sign that said where the big boys play, and they'd be fine with that because that was basically their slogan.
That's their motto.
Then.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So I'm sure they were fine with that. But no, it didn't seem like there was like a ton of people, but it seemed more intimate. Like maybe it was just like a crowd of like a couple thousand.
But what was nice, I think, and part of the reason they did it is that it made the show feel like it was sold out because you had 4 levels to it, and you got fans all the way back out there. They don't have to worry about ticket sales for this first show because people are just coming to the mall. They're going to watch the product. So I think from a visual standpoint, the place looked like it was packed, but like you said, there might have only been a couple thousand people sitting there watching it. So
it looked very sardined. It looked like anybody that was there had great quote unquote seats to the action.
Haddix, how about you? What was your initial thoughts seeing this?
This is going to sound stupid because this took place in the 90s, but it had a very 90s feel to it.
So you can say that they're very modern for their time.
But by that I mean it almost seemed, and this is where it's going to be fun to watch Raw and Nitro next week when they're both on and we're reviewing both of them. But it almost seemed over the top 90s, and maybe that's just how they were filmed back then. I don't know these.
The
things.
90s is very over the top in general too. So
that's what I mean. It was just kind of like, you watch something now or even in the Attitude Era, and it just kind of was TV. This almost seemed way over the top. They were overemphasizing everything. It was just. If we shot something now and we were setting it in the 90s, I mean, you could just make it exactly like that and people would believe it. It was
absolutely
to the T.
That said, then they pan down to your announcing crew, and you've got Eric Bischoff, of course, kind of doing what Vince McMahon is doing at this point for WWF, and he's sort of leading play-by-play commentary. And he's joined by Bobby Heenan, of course, one of the most famous managers of all time, great heel commentator, great heel manager. And then you've got Steve Mongo McMichael. The 3-man announcing crews are always a little tricky, I think, because you get 2 there, they can play off of each other pretty well. You got 3, you had a different dynamic, and some 3-man announcing groups really struggle, and it's something you still see with today's product. Mongo, it looks like the role Mongo is going to play is he's trying to immediately attack Bobby Heenan. Heenan's going to be the heel commentator, and Michael's supposed to get the fans behind him as he, cracks on Bobby Heenan. I think he calls him Bobby Hernia and Bobby the Stain, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think he came off really poorly myself. I've never been a Mongo McMichael fan. The best thing he ever did was bring Deborah McMichaels to the forefront, but whatever. Kyle, what are your thoughts on the 3-man crew here?
I see what you mean by the whole idea of like if you have one guy that's basically just in charge of calling the match, calling the obvious, then you have the 2 other people that are kind of giving the opinion, the other one giving the counter. So that I understand that point. Obviously, this is the first episode. I'm not going to judge anybody yet. I will prejudge Mongo only because I hate him. I think he's like one of the worst wrestlers of all time.
Horrible.
He has no charisma whatsoever. Like here's the thing. Bobby the Brain Heenan deserved a much better counterpart.
I mean,
on the commentary
it's a little unfair for Mongo because Heenan is one of the greats of all time. So you put yourself in a bad position to begin with, but man, he did himself no favors.
Heenan's not going to be outdone by anybody unless that person is worthy. And Mongo's not worthy.
No, I mean, Jesse Ventura or something like that. It was one of the few names I could think of off the top of my head that might give him a run for his money in a commentary battle of wits and that kind of thing. But Mongo McMichael, not on that list.
No, I agree. But like I said, the Heenan made up for it by basically, for the most part, anytime Mongo had like a little quip or like a Bobby the Stain, like Bobby came back hard. Like Bobby, he knew what to say. He knows exactly what to say to get him to shut up.
Haddix, anything you want to add about the 3-man crew here?
I'll be honest with you, other than Bischoff, I had no idea who the other two guys were.
Wow, you don't know who Heenan is?
But I shouldn't say that. I guess I've heard his name. Mongo, never heard of. Couldn't tell you where he was. Heenan, I knew he was. I guess I knew he was a popular name. I couldn't tell you about his career or anything like that. He was a huge
manager for like Andre the Giant.
Yeah, exactly. So
back in the 90s and 80s and stuff. But
I've heard the name tossed around, but I could give you. But not knowing all that, I did not like Mongo during the thing. Like I did think he was a little too much for me. You know what I mean? Again, I didn't hate him or anything, but there was a couple times I was like, oh,
give it time.
Right,
you will.
Yeah,
you will.
Kaiser, I did have one question to ask you about. Did you think though that maybe Bischoff was maybe getting a little bit too invested in because usually I'm used to like the middle guy being, hey, here's this guy. I wonder what he's doing here. Like, doesn't know much, but he just seemed like everything that was happening, like, not only was he calling the shots, but he was also like get him out of here. Who is he was also taking a side.
Yeah, he was a little bit. I think he was trying to do play-by-play and then also kind of be the Vince McMahon. You can tell Bischoff runs the show or has a lot of authority. Maybe you don't know that he's kind of the GM or anything like that. But
whereas when Vince did commentary, he didn't come off seem like he owned the business.
He
owned
actually
the
tried
company.
to play off like he didn't many times.
Like he didn't know anything that was going on. Right. Whereas it seemed like anything that happened that was like out of nowhere, like Bischoff kind of had this like attitude of like, what's he doing here, or like what, or once again, somebody who took a bias, and that was something that I wasn't used to. Having all three guys having a different bias,
right? I'll give you that. But like you said, it's their first time all together. I think it's Mongo's first time like as an announcer on television. So we'll see how it goes with them going forward. But was not impressed with Mongo to start. That said, let's just get into the show now. And we had our opening match: Jushin Thunder Liger versus Flying Brian Pillman. And Hoagie, you had a lot to say about this match, and I'm going to kind of let you break it down. But I just thought it was funny that they bring in Liger from New Japan, and they tell you he's from New Japan, but the ring announcer says he's one of Japan's most famous wrestlers. Like he just needed to let the crowd know, like, hey, guys, this is a pretty good gig.
Nobody at the Mall of America knows who Liger is, but here's the thing: is Thunder Liger is a big deal.
Oh, he's
over
a huge
Japan.
deal. He's a huge deal. Yeah. I just thought that was funny.
At that point, he was almost like a Hogan type of character in New Japan. So they had to say that just to tell people, like, hey, look, this isn't just some scrub that we're throwing at Brian Pillman. So, yeah, sure. So people wanted to at least invest in it and go, oh, okay, so we should watch him. We should pay attention. Now, I don't know, for the people who watched Nitro, ever, one of the big things that they always did, and it shows in this very first match, is that they like to start the show with a lot of high octane offense in their first matches because they really want to keep you on the show. So there's usually not a lot of promos. There's usually not a lot of, or unless it's like a big promo, like we're waiting for a reaction from last week or from a pay-per-view. If none of that's really happening, you're getting usually the cruiserweight, the luchador, the high flying, wrestlers.
Yeah,
and
this is all the high spot. Definitely the first hour. At least when Nitro went to like 3 hours and stuff, this was the opening for sure.
Right. So this was definitely supposed to be the like you can't change the channel, and it's only going to get better because you went from maybe guys you don't really know to people you do know being in matches that might not be as high-flying and entertaining, but their names keep you watching. Brian Pillman and Liger and Thunder Liger are not going to, by name, be like, oh, yeah, these guys, I know them. But when you watch them wrestle, it's like, oh, shit, I need to stay on the TV. So as far as the match actually going, there were a lot of mess-ups. Which
it was very sloppy.
Yeah, it was very sloppy. It felt like these guys really didn't, get to know each other or kind of figure themselves out. It was from both ends too, and I'm sure a lot of it might just have to do with the fact that most botches are usually not done by the person doing the move. It's usually the person taking the move a lot of times. And I think that's what was going on, was that I think a lot of times the wrestler performing the move was trying to perform the move like a Hurricane Rana, Frankensteiner, head scissors takedown, something like that, something that looks cool and high flying. But the other side maybe wasn't ready, didn't know that was coming. It wasn't choreographed very well. And so there were a lot of good bumps, a lot of good high explosive bumps. But then every once in a while you had and here's the thing, the commentators didn't even let them off the hook. They were saying he's not really hitting that well.
But I think they did it in a good way. I hate when commentators try to play it off when there's an obvious botch or somebody completely whiffs on a kick or something like that. I like when the announcers played off he just missed that, or he just didn't hit that like he normally should have. And
he looks like he might not have got. It looks like he might not have got all of that one type of thing.
Something like that. I respect that.
Yeah, and I do too. And so in the end, Brian Pillman wins, which would never happen if this was in Japan, because Thunder Liger is basically Hogan in that area. Pillman won, and they were both baby faces. They're both good guys, so they wanted to play that up. They shook hands and kind of pat each other on the back. They both raised each other's arms at the end of it. But overall, it was a perfect choice for a match to open a brand new show, because people who were watching Raw didn't see this kind of wrestling. Most of the people in Vince McMahon's world are big, muscular men that have maybe 4 moves in their repertoire, and they go in, they do their 4 moves, they take a couple pops from the crowd, they end the match, they're out. There's a lot of near falls. Even though it was sloppy, it was very fast paced. You would think a lot of these really cool looking moves would end the match. It was a lot of near falls, a lot of kickouts. There was a surfboard at some point that nobody does anymore. It was just a very refreshing, different look to what I think everyone's used to seeing wrestling in the mid 90s.
Absolutely. That said, let's 1 to 5 star rating. What are you giving it?
As far as that particular match at that particular point, the match itself is if we're gonna go 4 stars or whatever, 3 out of 4, the match itself was probably a 2.5 out of 4. But I give it a 3.5 out of 4 as far as the right people, the right choice of match. This is exactly how you wanted to start the match. You didn't want to have a slower pace with big, strong men. This is exactly the kind of match you wanted.
Haddix, how about you?
Again, maybe it's my not really into the WCW, but I thought it was a 2.
I agree. I'm going to give it 2. I can appreciate what they were trying here. I just think it wasn't executed well enough. But give it 2 stars.
Nowhere near well enough. Yeah.
Right. Moving on. Before they cut to commercial, they did a quick promo with the classic Nitro Fire background behind it of just Sting calling out Flair for their upcoming match after the break, just kind of letting people know what's coming up. Then after they return from break, you get Pastamania. Of course, that's Hogan having a new restaurant that's in the Mall of America called Pastamania, and he just sits there with a bunch of kids around him. And my favorite quote about this whole thing is he's like, "I'm slim and trim from all this pasta," which I feel like you're eating all that carbs, Hogan. You wouldn't be slim and trim, but that's just me. Haddix, you wanted to make a quick note about this segment here?
I should have when I was watching it, but I want to go back and see how many times he, either in a word or by itself, used the word pasta. I mean, he kept calling everyone pasta maniacs. About Pastamania.
It's a standard Hogan promo, but instead of Hulkamania, he says Pastamania. And
it was just insane.
So then they follow that up with their United States Championship match. You've got Sting and Ric Flair. Of course, Ric Flair is the United States Champion at this time. And I thought, Haddix, this would be a good one for you to break down because you're kind of somebody who's new to WCW. This may be your first Nitro you've ever watched. So, kind of, what did you think about this match here?
I actually enjoyed this match. I was looking forward to this match because I'm a big Ric Flair fan. Even though, again, I don't know much of his work from the WCW days other than highlights of all his struts and things like that. But I actually liked this match. I liked I like the, heel Ric Flair, kind of on his knees begging a lot and all that kind of stuff. There's a couple things, though, and you guys could probably touch on this better. One, I didn't know Sting's colors were so flamboyant before I'm used to seeing pictures of him in his, I guess it was when the NWO was around, but the reds and blacks, the whites and blacks, like more of like a scary look with the long hair.
Yeah, he did that crow
like that.
Look eventually, but this is this is the Sting of the
of the early
80s.
Yeah,
this is the Stinger.
Yeah.
This is the
Stinger. Yeah, they kept calling him the Stinger. The other thing I noticed, and I don't know if this was booking and maybe this happens, for a while yet, but I feel like all the moves Ric Flair did to Stinger, they didn't affect him. He did a couple suplexes, I think, and he would bounce right back.
Selling a lot of this.
And like Rick, and again, I don't know if it was on purpose because Ric Flair, I think there was a couple times he did a suplex and kind of got up and like started to strut like he was, badass or something, but Sting was like popped up right behind him, kind of waiting for him to turn around. One of those deals. The chest
he had
chops.
A lot of Hogan like kind of Hulk up type thing when he was in WWF and Sting was the WCW Hogan in a sense where he would almost just like summon this like very brief moment of just like invincibility where like you did punches, slaps, anything, and he just laughed it off. But yeah, no, that's kind of been at Sting's thing for a little bit. But it's not a Flair thing. It's Sting's always done that. That wasn't like any backstage or like why would he do that? That's been kind of his thing.
Yeah.
Did anyone notice that he did that Sting power slammed or like big power slammed Flair like 10 times in this match where he lifted him like way over his head and just throw him down?
Yeah.
It happened a ton.
He did.
Yeah, that was a lot of gorilla press slams. I could never really.
Right.
First of all, it keeps reminding me like seriously, Sting is strong. He actually is a very strong person.
They should have called him Strong instead of Sting, right?
Get it? I get it. The stronger.
Stinger.
And then, of course, the big thing here, Lex Luger shows up. And did you know that Luger was debuting at this show? This is kind of a big deal. And, if you're familiar with the Monday Night Wars, this is sort of the first shot that was fired was this whole Luger showing up.
Was a Luger thing. And I didn't know that he was going to show up when he did. In the past few years, I have like seen things, or especially on the WWE Network, about the Monday Night Wars, and Luger going over there was a big deal and all that. And although he didn't do much, so he pops up right here and then leaves.
He just gets everybody talking. Is kind of what the idea was
in his white blouse.
And I don't know if this sets up I guess he sets up something later. I thought maybe when he pops up here that he's gonna set something up with Sting or set something up with Flair in the future. Obviously, that question gets answered later. But I did know that this was a big deal because I know Luger was one of the big guys over at WWE for a while.
Yeah, and actually,
I'm glad to know that the security there didn't really give a damn that he was just like standing in the ring or standing by the ramp.
It's the Mall of America security. What do you expect, man? Paul Blart not going to stop Lex Luger from coming in. Yeah, Lex might just be shopping.
Yeah, he's at the mall.
I think that's kind of what Bischoff was going for here. He obviously wanted him to keep it a secret. The whole contract signing was under wraps. Luger wrestled, or actually did a run-in at SummerSlam, which happened 10 days before this. And I think he even wrestled at like a house show for WWF like 2 days prior. So this whole thing it's a big deal that Luger shows up, and it was sort of the first moment of like, wow, anything can happen on Nitro, that sort of thing. And it might sound a little cheesy now, and it may not, with all the way the internet, social media is today, you can't have something quite like this happen. But this was a big deal back then, having him show up like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had another point that I was gonna bring up, but one thing I thought was really funny with Bischoff was that Bischoff was just so upset that he was there, like, what's he doing here? Get him out of here. And then you would think that if you really meant that, like if it was just like somebody who was just trespassing, or you didn't want someone there because he was from the other company and you didn't want to speak of that other company, then he would leave and then you wouldn't speak of it again. But then it was just like Bischoff every 10 minutes talking about like Luger showing up. What was he doing here? I just thought that was pretty funny. And here's what I was thinking of. One thing that people here, you're going to start realizing or seeing as a maybe a consistent theme sometimes is that if WCW secretly signs somebody from the WWF, they will find out what was recorded on that Raw or whatever, because back then a lot of those were taped days before, and so Nitro already knew what happened on the Raw that was coming up, and a lot of the times they'll sign somebody from the WWF to WCW. They will be live on the show at the exact same time that same person is on Raw.
That famously happened with Rick Rude, which at some point I'm sure we'll get to that. But there was a lot of that. That said, the match kind of finishes up. Arn Anderson shows up then too. There's a lot of chaos in this match. And I believe Flair actually gets DQ'd in this match. He has Sting in the figure 4, but he won't let go of the rope. And they ring the bell. They don't really say anything. And then Arn and Flair kind of get into it, sort of continuing or setting up a feud between the two of them. That said, guys, what is your grade on this match? Haddix, I'll start with you.
I'd probably say a 4-star. And maybe that's because I was kind of let down by the match before, but I actually really like this. I think I love me some Flair and Stinger, so I give it a 4.
Hoagie?
Only because the ending was weird, and there was just a lot of confusion with what was going on, a lot of chaos going on. I'll give it a 3. Both wrestlers looked really good, but it's just weird when you have somebody in your finisher and then you get yourself DQ'd while he's in your finisher.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm with you, about 3 stars. If you include everything else, Luger showing up, Arn coming in, all the chaos, maybe that makes it better. I don't know. There's a lot going on here, but as far as just the match goes, I'll give it 3 stars. That said, as the chaos is going on with Arn and Flair in the ring, they're kind of, I think they leave and starting to wrestle off towards the locker room, so to speak. Scott Norton shows up, and he feels it's time to demand matches and get everyone's face. And then Savage comes in, and they're ready to wrestle right then and there. But Bischoff, of course, saying this isn't a sanctioned match. It's not signed. He doesn't belong here, that kind of thing. Says it's not happening right now, and they need to get Norton out of here. And Mongo McMichael, for some reason, got into Norton's face, too. A lot of chaos here. Haddix, do you have any idea who Scott Norton is?
No, I had no idea what was going on. And then I had no idea why all of a sudden Randy Savage was ringside. I mean, it was a very weird, weird.
This whole show, you'll start noticing that people are just showing up because it's like, hey, we want to put you on TV for a couple of minutes.
And I understand that, but
yeah,
as far as with the story, like for the story, like why the hell was Randy? Like if it was Randy Savage was in the match, okay, but he just shows up ringside like I'll fight you.
I think they just had a lot. They wanted to get a lot thrown into a 45-minute episode because it's in a 1-hour show with commercials. So they're like, we need to bring everyone in and out. All right, Arn, you're going to show up here. Luger, you're going to be here. Scott Norton, I need you here. We're going to bring Savage out here. Just a lot going on.
But yeah, to me, that could have been a guy that just came out of the crowd. I had no idea who that was.
Right. You'll see him. He becomes, I don't know, a mid-carder, a lower tier mid-carder, I guess.
He's a squash match guy. If you want to get somebody on TV for 2 minutes for someone just to destroy somebody and walk out, that's Scott Norton.
Yeah, but they always try to book him like he's the strongest man. He'll really beat your ass, and then he just turns out to kind of job more than anything. But that's enough about that. Then as they cut to commercial, Bischoff makes a comment about, check out Sabu, a promo for Sabu who's joining the ranks of WCW. And they show one of the worst vignette video promo things I've ever seen. It was very
90s.
It was supposed to be a highlight package of Sabu, but yeah, it was very 90s, very colorful but blurry, and it was like kind of, they had like, every time he did a move, it like trailed with him in like a weird effect. It was awful. It looked over whatever the version of Photoshop in 1995 was. That's kind of
it was way overproduced. It didn't need all that.
No, and it really didn't. I think it just failed miserably. So they go to commercial. They come back, and this is the Harley Davidson giveaway. WCW, of course, always doing little giveaways and things like that. But to me, the only thing worthwhile in this segment other than Mike Hill in Cullman, Alabama, who won his Harley. Maybe he still has it, maybe he doesn't. Was just Mean Gene. Comes back for commercial, and Mean Gene opens up with, "To think I could have bought 10 acres of land here for $17,000 in 1953. Of course, I was only 8 years old at the time. And then here's our winner of the Harley. I'm like, what the hell was that, Mean Gene? Did it just make any sense to anybody, or just it seemed like completely off the rails there?
You know what? Maybe if we were in the moment and they were at the Mall of America and it was like, oh, funny. Yeah, that joke did not age well as far as going back and watching the show now in 2017. Yeah, that kind of was like, all right, Gene.
Pretty much. Made me laugh, though. Then they followed this up with a promo for WCW Saturday Night, which, of course, Hoagie, I think you put in the notes, nothing says the main event like Dirty Dick Slater and pretty much everyone else main eventing that isn't Sting or Savage.
I think it was Sting and Savage taking on the Blue Bloods, which for people who don't know who the Blue Bloods was, that was Lord Steven Regal and some other guy, and then Dirty Dick Slater and I can't remember who else he was fighting, but it wasn't Johnny B. Bad. That's what it was.
Oh, good old Johnny B. Bad.
A.K.A. Mark Marrow for Haddix, in case you weren't sure.
There you go. I was not sure. So,
but yeah, so that's that. Then we move into the Mr. Wall Street promo. Again, they're really throwing a lot of characters at you in this hour. Mr. Wall Street, of course, formerly known as IRS for those of you who watch WWF. So again, they bring another character over from WWF. They call him Mr. Wall Street, so he still has that money connotation. And he even makes a comment like something about the IRS may try to get a hold of him or something like that to basically wink, wink, nod, nod, hey, I'm IRS. But the funny thing is he doesn't know whether his name is Mr. Wall Street or Michael Wall Street or what they're going to call his character, so he refers to himself as all of that during the promo. Ultimately, it's a IRS or Wall Street promo, and that's about all I can say about it because he's never been great on the mic, and that promo did not much to get me excited for him by any means.
He was a much better wrestler when the $1 Million Man was speaking for both of them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And then that said, we move into our main event, and this is, of course, the WCW World Championship match. Your champion, Hulk Hogan of Pastamania success, versus Big Bubba Rogers. And for those of you who may not know Big Bubba Rogers, he's the big boss man. So of course
he's a fat big boss man.
And they actually allude to that. I think Mongo says something about he was a former prison guard in there. So again, wink, wink, nod, nod to you WWF fans who are watching Nitro today. My first thing is like you can already see that WCW's characters are less professions. Like they're not the prison guard. They're not they're not the clown, garbage man, the clown, anything like that. They're trying to be more real names, that kind of thing, for the most part. That said, they still have some sort of identity. I don't know what Big Bubba Rogers' identity was. The dude came out in a suit, and he wrestled in kind of an unbuttoned long-sleeve shirt and suspenders. It was terrible. This match, I think, was just they were trying to play off of the names, and these two had success in world title matches back in the day. So, I think they were trying to put that on there. That said, I think the most surprising thing for me was Hogan was very, used a lot of heel tactics, I felt like, in this match. Like, Jimmy Hart, who's his manager, would kind of distract the ref, and then Hogan would do, he did, a 10-count punch in the corner with, a T-shirt over Bubba's face, things like that. Things you expect the heel to do, distract while I do some stuff like that. I think he might have eye gouged him a couple of times. It was very bizarre from that kind of standpoint. But at the end of the day, it's a prototypical Hulk match. Ends with the big boot, which kind of came out sloppy, and then the leg drop. All I gotta say is you could tell Hogan is the most over guy. You got Flair, you got Sting here. Hogan is the most well-known, most over guy. The crowd was into him. And the match is just whatever. They put the world title on the line. Fine. Hogan wins. No big deal. But then you get the Dungeon of Doom running. And I think at one point Bischoff makes a comment to like just let you guys know in the story, like the Dungeon and Doom are trying to take down Hogan. So all of a sudden a bunch of Kevin Sullivan's jobbers come out and attack Hogan. Hogan starts to fight him off, and then Luger shows up to help him. And ultimately Luger and Hogan go face-to-face in the ring, and they make comments. Luger kind of cuts his promo about how, he left that other, basically left that other company to fight here where the big boys play. They're throwing that down their throats, and basically said he wants a shot at the title. Hogan said, "You don't have to earn anything. I'll give you a title next week," basically. Overall, I give the match 1 star, but the Luger promo setting up for next week's Nitro, I'll bump it up to 2 there for that. What do you guys want to add about this kind of finale to the show?
Me personally, again, not knowing all this stuff, saw a fat big boss man, and somehow Hogan looks worse.
Before you say anything more, Big Boss Man was never a trim gentleman.
That's
he's not eating enough Pastamania, brother. He's got to be slim and trim.
At least on his second stint in WWF later on, he at least is just like, I guess you would say he's stocky. I mean, he looked fat in this.
Well, I also think he was more buttoned up as well.
Well, maybe it was just the get-up.
Big Bubba likes to party. The dude unbuttons that shirt. That's the chest.
But my first thought was a fat big boss man, and somehow a Hogan who looks older because of his hairdo than when he actually gets older, which I don't know how that's possible. But I agree, the match was just not good. It was a bunch of punches, and that was it.
It's a typical Hogan match from that era, really.
And maybe so. And again, we'll kind of see how it goes. But yeah, the match itself was not very good. Had that match ended and then the show ended, it would have been a horrible ending. But again, to what you said, Luger coming out kind of helped save it a little bit. And I'm assuming, unless things change, they're setting up for a babyface matchup. I mean,
that's kind of what it looks
Luger
like
was really
at this point. It's just Luger helped Hogan. The crowd seems to be kind of into Luger, and then, of course, Hogan is as over as they come right now.
Yeah.
So it is.
So it's like, who do you root for?
Right. At this point, it's just 2 of your favorites going head to head, and of course they set it up for next week's Nitro, which is a smart move from the standpoint. Like, now people are like, hey, I watched this. Now I need to see what happens with Luger and Hogan next week. Title's on the line. Like, that's gonna be pretty good. And then on top of that, they do make mention at some point that Scott Norton is getting his match against Savage for next week as well. So your boy Randy Savage will be there next week, wrestling this newcomer Scott Norton.
Also, kudos to the WCW crew to getting that contract, getting them signed like that. You would think you'd have to go to like headquarters, maybe do some interviews. They got to do some
drug test.
Yeah, like if it's a guy that size, you got to make sure has no like record on him. Like, he trespassed. He broke in through the barrier.
Him and Luger.
In the face.
They got 2 guys signed and put them in matches. One of them to basically run the company if he wins his match next week, like head of the company. So they really, J.J. Dillon or whoever's running the company at this point, really, streamlining things.
Yeah, exactly. It just seemed like all they had to do was just get on a payphone and just be like, "Can I have a match?" And they're like, "Dude, you got it. You're good. You're good to go. I trust you. You seem like you got the face of someone I can trust."
Absolutely. That said, let's just kind of overall thoughts just on that was it for the show. They kind of set some things up, teed up for the following week. Haddix, for you, this is we're calling it your first Nitro. What was your thoughts? What was your impression after you watched this?
I mean, I can keep it brief because we've kind of touched on the fact that I really was a newcomer in the Attitude Era, but I'm used to a more fast-paced, evolving storylines with the behind-the-scenes stuff that, then the storylines kind of get carried out into the matches, and then maybe there's people interfere and all that kind of stuff. I'm used to more fast-paced, and I'm sure that this is just how it was back then, but because of that, it seems slow. So I'm not like mad or upset.
Yeah, it'll
or
be
anything,
interesting to compare the matches and stuff on next week's Nitro to those of Raw.
Exactly.
You have an apples to apples comparison at that point.
Yeah, so I mean, really, other than it just seems slow to me. But other than that, I enjoyed it for what it was.
How about you, Hoagie?
Well, first thing, as far as the actual Hogan match and everything, like I totally get why they wanted to do it. Like with those people, it's two people that merchandise wise actually are probably one of the more popular people. Big Boss Man sold a lot of merchandise in the '90s.
But did Big Bubba sell much merchandise? Like, were a lot of people buying suspenders and button-up shirts with the Big Bubba logo?
That broke with the breakable buttons. No, but once again, I mean, I think he was a recognizable face, and so that was a smart move.
He was. No, from a booking standpoint, I understood everything about this card in show.
Right. And the whole thing with like the great thing once again about Luger and Hogan is kind of the same thing. You have Hogan who is the end all be all of wrestling at that point, and then you've got Luger who had a lot of TV time for when Nitro wasn't around. Only thing he really had on TV was the Saturday night or the Saturday morning WWF, and then the Monday Night Raws where Luger would be on. So Luger had TV presence already. So when people were watching wrestling, they probably got to see a lot of Luger. So this was a familiar face going up against the face of the industry. So that was a good choice. Now on the overall with the whole show, the booking was as good as it could be. I'm not saying that all the matches were great, but they were good enough. I think the booking was exactly what they needed. They had the fast pace. Yeah, they had the fast paced match with two whatevers, but once again, the match itself was fun to watch. Then you had two superstars in Sting and Flair, and then you ended with the face of the company putting on the title against another familiar face that will put the butts in the seats. So the other thing is because it was live, it's going to get chaotic. It was chaotic. You had just
I think they
people
wanted
coming
that,
out.
Yeah,
they wanted to give you the whole like
unpredictability.
you never know what's happening next type of thing. Like that's what they wanted to sell.
It's must see TV. I mean, Eric Bischoff at one point wanted to do away with house shows, and he literally wanted to be producing just a TV show that was wrestling. So, what do you like in TV shows? You like suspense. You like you like unpredictability, that kind of thing, and that's what he was doing here.
Absolutely. And the one thing I also wanted to mention was it seemed like they definitely were trying to hint at like, oh, you wouldn't find this type of excitement on the anywhere else. And then Mongo every once in a while would be like, well, if you don't think this is entertainment, well, then you might as well just be watching, and then Bishop would be like, whoa, dude,
basically calling out the WWF in as nice a way as they could, which will change quickly as time goes on. You'll start to see Bischoff really, really turn it up when it comes to his disdain
by name
for
stuff,
for the World Wrestling Federation. Yeah, it'll come. I don't know how soon. It may not be till the NWO era, but it's on the horizon in the next year or so. But
I think it starts happening, or at least like really starts to ramp up when Nash and Hall show up.
Right. So we're looking at May of next year before we start seeing any of that. That said, all I need to add is that, I agree with you. Everything from a booking standpoint made a lot of sense. I think it was a great kickoff show. You compare that to like what TNA did recently when they rebranded themselves as Impact, and it was garbage. They did a great job here. Raw was preempted. They really, they get you interested for what's happening next week. All I've got to add is the show closes out and they show the announcing crew sitting at the table, and Mongo McMichael has a fucking chihuahua wearing a little devil suit. So I need to ask you, Haddix, because I'm familiar with, I think his name is Pepe or something like that. Haddix, did you see the dog, and what was your thoughts when you saw him holding the dog, if you did notice it?
Now that you say that, I remember him holding the dog, but at the time, I guess I didn't think twice about it. I don't know, maybe that was a shtick or something like that. So I didn't.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, it wasn't around at the beginning of the show when they showed Mongo.
You are right, though. Yeah,
he just
right.
It's all of a sudden there at the end, and they just like pretend like it was no big deal. And then I think Heenan makes a comment about how it's a little rat, but it just seemed out of the blue. Like all of a sudden, we're like, oh, Mongo's got a dog. Where did that happen? It's the like Anchorman, like where'd you get a grenade from? Like it kind of came out of nowhere there, and it is going to be. You'll see him with that damn dog every week, and it's always dressed up. It's very weird. I don't understand it at all, especially because he's not. They don't show the announcers on television a whole lot, so it's very strange to me. But I just all of a sudden it popped in at the end, and I'm like, oh, and Mongo's dog's there. So there you go.
Yeah, I didn't understand that only because once again, like there's been so many times they've gone back to the announce booth to where things have happened where once again Norton's getting in his face and there's no dog.
Right.
So where does the dog all of a sudden just get inserted? I would understand if the first thing you saw with all three of them and he was holding Pepe, like, all right, Pepe's gonna be part of the show. No, he was not part of that show until probably the last 20 minutes of the show. And for one point. That was it. It was just weird.
Very weird, but that's Mongo for you. It's worth noting. We'll probably close every show giving you the Nielsen ratings and who won that week, both ratings wise, and then our personal opinion. This week, Nitro did it 2.9. In comparison, Raw was averaging like a 2.2 to a 2.5 at this point in time. So you could say that WCW did very well for themselves for a kickoff debut show. And then on top of it, I think just in general, big winners by the way they booked this. They set things up. No Raw to go head-to-head with. I think they put themselves in a good position going forward. Your guys' thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, again, as someone who never watched, I could definitely see how it was edgy, if you will. So, I mean, I'm definitely curious to kind of see where it all goes since I never have.
The one thing that they're going to do a lot of with these shows moving forward is you're either going to have the high octane offense with either people with maybe who are less known but are going to give you a match you can't turn away from or change the channel, or you're going to have matches with big name stars. They might be in their prime, but during their golden age of wrestling, these were the big hitters. Your Randy Savages, your Hogans, your Flairs, that kind of thing. That was really what WCW was doing when it was time for like WWF to move on to younger talent to move forward into the future. WCW was basically writing checks to a lot of these old wrestlers that were basically just going to their pension lives with Ted Turner's money, and they were basically selling out arenas based on their names alone. So that is what you're going to see a lot with Nitro versus WWF moving forward.
Absolutely, and as we kind of wrap things up here, I'm just curious, your guys' quick predictions. Haddix, I'm going to ask you first. Hogan Luger next week when we watch that episode, who's winning that championship, and then also who's winning that Scott Norton Randy Savage match?
I mean, I feel like it's got to be Randy, and I would say Hogan just because he's so over, but I don't know if maybe they're going to try to push Luger or whatnot. So I'll go Hogan Savage winning next week.
Hoagie, how about you?
I can see. I'm pretty sure Hogan's going to keep the title. I think they're still on the idea right now that titles change hands on pay-per-views more than on actual television. I think that changes later. That
Bischoff's philosophy changes at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Hogan holds the title. Whether or not maybe there's not a clean win in it, maybe it's a double count out or a interference happens, and once again both of them fight off the Dungeon of fucking Doom again. I don't know. But I don't see a clean win by either one. And then as far as Savage and Norton, honestly, I see the same thing. But if anything, I would say Savage wins. But I can also see, in order to push the whole Scott Norton being a kind of a mean streak kind of guy, him getting himself disqualified somehow.
Yeah, I hope you're right on the Scott Norton thing. I think it's terrible booking if they just have Norton come up, look like a badass, and then immediately job to Savage. Granted, it's Randy Savage, great guy, but still, I think that would be a poor way. They should have had him wrestle somebody else if they want him. They didn't want Savage to lose. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I agree on the Luger-Hogan thing. I think it's going to be a disqualification. I could definitely see a scenario where the Dungeon of Doom come in, and maybe it sets up a Hogan-Luger tag team match against couple of the Dungeon of Doom guys in the following week or something like that. But I don't know. We'll have to see, and you guys will have to see next week. So check out the September 11th edition of Nitro, and then also September 11th, 1995 edition of Monday Night Raw. We're going to be breaking down both next week. It's going to be a lot of fun to kind of see how they both go in the first real head-to-head matchups in the Monday Night War. That said, give us a follow on iTunes, subscribe, leave us that rating, let us know what you thought, and reach out to us on social media. Technically, as of recording, we don't have a Twitter and a Facebook yet, but search the Monday Night Tour. I'm sure our handles and stuff will be up there at that point. And that's going to be the show for this week. I'm Josh Kaiser, he is Josh Haddix, and he is Kyle Hoagland. And we will see you next time on the Monday Night Tour.
Have a good week.
Too funny. See you later.